Frank here. I just recently realized that for all the exercise tutorials and other concepts I presented on my channel, I've never really touched on programming. So today, I want to start a new series describing how I personally go about programming for strength training. Now, I'm a powerlifter, so many of the concepts I outline will obviously be biased towards a powerlifting style. However, they are for the most part simply going to be generalized concepts that apply to anyone who's using the weight room simply to get stronger or more muscular. Now, before I get started, it's important to bear in mind that the entire methodology I'm going to present is based on my own personal proclivities, things that I've found to work for myself with great success that have been successfully and easily repeated in other people I've trained over the years. None of the concepts are groundbreaking. They're simply a conglomeration of ideas that I've learned over the years, tweaked and molded to my own personal liking through countless hours of trial and error. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there are 1,000 different ways to build muscle and strength. What follows is simply how I choose to go about doing it, the methods that I know work well without adding undue complication. So, with that out of the way, let's get to it. Today I want to start with basic programming. This is what I would have a beginner with little to no proper experience in the weight room do. In essence, it's a basic linear progression with the main lifts loosely based around percentage of 1 rep max. The duration of this phase can be several months to several years depending on how one's numbers are progressing. When it comes to programming, I'm a big proponent of not making things more complicated than they need to be and not doing more work than is necessary to drive progress. So if you're still increasing your squat by squatting once a week, why on earth would we have you squat 2 or 3 times a week? Why not save that for when once a week is no longer enough to drive progress? Eventually, we could add so many sessions in that there wouldn't be any time left in the day. But increasing frequency is an ace card that's better played later on in the game. I often hear the argument that beginner lifters need more frequency than advanced lifters to perfect their motor patterns. But in my experience, when first starting out, aside from the fact that there's never existed a novice lifter who actually wanted to be in the gym squatting or deadlifting 3 times a week, once a week is plenty of practice to get your technique good enough to use the relatively light weights that you'll be using during this phase of training. Maxing out shouldn't even be a consideration. It's completely unnecessary, and training weights should never exceed the point of technical breakdown. Remember, we're talking about a segment of lifters who can make strength and muscle gains training with only 50 to 60% of their 1 rep max. And as you gain more experience, the majority of your technical kinks will have a tendency to work themselves out as long as you always focus on the proper technical cues while executing the lifts and you don't neglect any weak muscle groups with your assistance work. So the first thing I like to do with a raw beginner is teach them basic technique on the main lifts, usually squat, bench press, deadlift, overhead press, and power clean. The purpose here is simply to get them lifting good enough that we can load the movement pattern a little bit and they aren't going to hurt themselves. From here, we would work up to very conservative maxes on each of the main lifts. I say maxes in air quotes because these shouldn't be true maximum effort lifts. They should simply be the point where technical breakdown becomes too pronounced and lifting more weight would become unsafe. But now you have an idea of where you're starting and you can build a template around that. I like to start my lifters off with 60% of their beginning 1 rep max on the squat and the deadlift and 50% of their beginning 1 rep max on presses and power cleans. So if we have a hypothetical lifter who was able to squat 185 pounds, bench press 155 pounds, and deadlift 245 pounds all in his first session, then he would begin the program with 110 pounds on the squat, 80 pounds on the bench press, and 145 pounds on the deadlift. He would train 3 days a week, having a dedicated squat day, a press day, and a deadlift day, each with accompanying assistance exercises, and he would add 5 pounds to the bar each session on each of the main lifts. The goal for each main lift is to complete 5 sets of 5 reps, going for as many repetitions as possible on the 5th and final set. At the culmination of a 16-week training cycle, he would squat 185 pounds for 5 sets of 5 reps, which was his starting 1 rep max on the squat. He would bench 155 pounds for 5 sets of 5 reps, which was also his starting 1 rep max. And he would deadlift 220 pounds for 5 sets of 5. At this point, he could retest his maxes, take a week off, and restart the cycle for another round, changing only the assistance exercises in order to keep interest high or if a weakness had begun to present itself. Here's how the cycle for our hypothetical lifter would look on paper. Like I said, this is very basic programming, but in this case, basic is best. A beginner could run this exact cycle probably 3 to 6 times before making any major substantive changes to it. That means they would be on this program for between 1 and 2 years before they had to make any major overhauls, and they would make tremendous progress during this time. As long as you understand that after the first couple runs, you may have to modulate the rate at which you increase the intensity during the training cycle, frequency and volume can be held constant during this time, and progress will continue to be made every run through the cycle. Just to give you a quick example of what can be accomplished in a relatively short period of time using this type of programming, a lifter I trained for only about a year who was just recovering from an ACL tear was able to take his deadlift from 275 pounds when we first started to 415 pounds after going through 3 rounds of this beginner cycle. We only tested his max on 3 occasions. In his very first session, where he deadlifted 275 pounds, after 1 round through the training cycle, where he deadlifted 350 pounds, and after his 3rd round through the cycle, where he deadlifted 415 pounds. That's a 140-pound increase to his deadlift in 12 months, utilizing nothing but a basic beginner training cycle and submaximal loads. Here he is pulling 415 pounds. As you can see, quote-unquote beginner gains can be taken farther than most people think simply by utilizing a low volume and low frequency approach as long as intensity is progressed and modulated properly. Hell, I wish that I had somebody make me do this type of a program when I was first getting started. And when this basic beginner cycle fails to yield further results, then we can begin to manipulate these 3 variables to drive further progress without having boxed ourselves in by tinkering with any one of them too early in the game. Remember, as stupid and fucking cliche as it sounds, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And in order to maximize your progress, you need to focus on the big picture. And that is the product of years and years, even decades of work, building upon each other. Anyway, that's all I got for now, guys. Next time, I'll go over how I approach programming for those who have graduated from the beginner phase and are moving into the intermediate phase. Until then, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.